Hello, everyone. This is Jeffrey Geisner for the Obligations of Memory podcast. I'm here with Ettie Zilber. We're going to be talking about her terrific Holocaust memoir of love and resilience, Mama's Survival from Lithuania to America. It is a beautiful book. It's on Amazon, and I highly recommend that you give this a read. For all of us who are in the Holocaust memoir world, it's definitely something to take a look at. So why don't you give a little bit of instead of it's not a movie trailer, but a book trailer, why someone would want to read your book.
Okay, thanks, Jeffrey. Well, first of all, my book is definitely a memoir. It's actually a double memoir. It is my mother's memoir based on her testimony that she gave to me and my sisters, which we recorded. So her part in the book is verbatim from her testimony. But then I also analyzed myself as a shrink of my own on myself. That's an interesting thing. But I tried to understand, I've been trying to understand myself and the impact of the Holocaust on me as the second generation. So the other part of the book is about that analysis. And there's a third section in the book, which also is based on the impact of the Holocaust on me when I decided to take a trip by myself in their footsteps, in my parents' footsteps, and that was quite a revelation for me. It was important for me to see the places that my parents had always talked about. So that's why this book is a little bit different than perhaps other memoirs. And so I heard from many readers, and I love hearing from readers about their thoughts about my mother's story, as well as the self-analysis, if you want to call it.
So let's talk a little bit about the self-analysis. Just to give you a little bit of background, I've shared in earlier episodes how I have been traumatized by the Holocaust. And what I found interesting is that I met a friend. Her name is, she's a psychologist out of LA. She actually runs 2 food groups, which also was of interest to me since I bake my mom's recipes from her Hungarian recipes. And then when I just happened to talk to Dr. Dana Schrager, she basically indicated that she's a 3G and that she also had nightmares. And all of a sudden we got on a Zoom and we started talking, and 2 hours later, we came up with an idea that maybe other people are suffering and they don't know why they're suffering. So last October in 2021, we put together a program for the Jewish Culture and Holocaust Remembrance Group Zoom live event. And we had over 100 people attend the program. It was called Into the Light, Managing Intergenerational Trauma. And since that program has run, and it's on the Jewish Culture and Holocaust Remembrance YouTube video channel, where you can play it and stream it, we've had over 400 people who've requested the recording that I sent, and it was and there's been many, many more streams of that program. And so I'm really interested in this topic because I know from that 400 or actually 500 people how people are suffering in silence, just like I was for almost my entire life, except the last 4 years. And so maybe you can tell me not about your mother's story, but a little bit of what you disclosed in that book about your shtick.
Okay. I have to emphasize that it's not only about trauma. When I talk about the impact of my parents, everybody is impacted by their parents. And so regardless of their background. And I analyzed the impact of my parents on my entire life, which included the decisions I made in my life, which included the careers that I chose, and I've changed careers, which included, in retrospect, I realized that my desire and my ability to move from one country to another and work in environments, international environments, is a direct outcome of my background, of my family, my attitude toward government, my attitude toward independence, my child rearing. All of these things I can connect back to my parents and their experiences in the Holocaust, before the Holocaust, after the Holocaust. Even my doctoral dissertation, which I focused on these kids who are taken and moved around the world because of their parents' work. I realized that these kids and I have a common background. And that has taken all of the research. I was able to finally understand that my parents impacted all of this, directly or indirectly. And so that's how I've divided it. So in the book, I've divided that impact into categories. This is my my academic background. You know, I can't write novels, so I have to have them. I have to put them in categories, right? So categories is connection to family, to the history, and to the heritage. I'm an avid genealogist. I am directly, that is a direct impact of my family's experiences. My whole knowledge, how it impacted me as far as learning languages. I have learned many languages, and I know the importance of learning languages, and I directly it's a direct result of my parents' multilingualism. The whole subject of immigration. You know how many times I've immigrated? I've immigrated 9 times.
Huh.
9 times in my life, I've immigrated. All right. Anything that has to do with the category of physical and mental health, you know, and this is a direct impact of my parents. My ability to take risks, being resilient, having pluck, as I mentioned, independence, absolutely track it back to my parents. My perspective on human nature and governance, won't go into any of that right now. I have a chapter on family idiosyncrasies, what I call idiosyncrasies, what, you know, curiosities about my family. You know, like in my house, you couldn't close a door. You had to have doors open. And it got to a point where I finally put my foot down. I said, I have to close the bathroom door. All right. But you just don't close doors in my house. All right. My attitude toward happiness and priorities, my decision making. What are my high priorities, lower priorities? What makes me happy? My attitude in general. My attitude about education, hard work, and work as therapy. That is a direct result of my mother. And my whole attitude toward financial security and frugality. And I'm sure that a lot of the things that I've mentioned in my books will resonate with other 2Gs. I think it'll resonate with other people too. Anybody whose parents, grandparents came through some kind of difficult time.
Now, you didn't have, Jacob didn't have that background.
Yes, he did.
Well, he didn't have come from the survivor side.
No, but his parents, it was very difficult living in Palestine, and it was very difficult in the early years. So he had experiences of difficulty. He didn't have the experience of being annihilated and watching your family killed in front of your eyes. No, but living in Palestine and Israel was not an easy, it wasn't an easy gig in those years. It's not an easy gig even now. So so that's why, you know, I encourage people. That's why I love to hear from readers about how I put that together. So it isn't only about trauma, it is direct impact. Now, we talked about trauma the last round. Yes, there are certain things in me. I have certain feelings and certain premonitions and certain fears. and I recognize them. And I have over the years, obviously at this age, I'm older than you, Jeffrey. I have learned to overcome them, but they're there. They're there.
Mhm. So now we're going to be talking a little bit more about the details of your book, but a little differently. So I'm going to take you not to the beginning, but I'm going to take you all the way to the end. And you have your book arriving in a box. And
Yes.
how was your feeling when that arrived? Was it self-published, or did you have a major publisher publish it? But
No, I
the,
had a publisher do it. She specializes in Holocaust memoirs.
okay.
And
Name of the, do you have the name?
yes, Amsterdam Publishers.
Right.
And so she published the book. And I never intended to write a book. I never intended to publish a book. This was not on the docket. I had enough experience with my first book, the professional book, so I didn't even think about it. I was specifically interested in my mother's testimony, because I wanted that for my children and for my grandchildren, so that they know where they came from. That's why I also do genealogy. It is, for me, it's like a puzzle. It's like, research. I love it. But I want the kids to have the tree so they know where they came from. And I encourage it in my students as well, all my students. And so this is something that is very, very important to a human being, to know where you came from. If you don't know where you came from, you don't know who you really are. And that is.
So what was the exhilaration? Was it, were you scared when that box of books came? Tell us what your emotions were when you saw that.
Very, very exciting. It was very exciting to have it published, particularly when I chose the photo. These are my parents in the DP camp and leaning on my father's Jeep. He was in charge of the motor pool in the DP camp, so they always had wheels. And
How old are they in this picture?
in this picture, they are 20, probably 23. He was probably 25. And the way he's holding her, the love, and they were reunited.
And
And
they were married when again? So
in ghetto.
they were married in the ghetto, so they were separated and your mom went to the concentration camp. Your father was in hiding. He eventually was a few months after his hiding, he was liberated by the Russians coming.
Yep.
It's quite amazing that they found each other.
Oh, that story is beyond belief, quite frankly.
Do you have a way of telling it? You have a way of telling us in a brief?
No, there's no way to tell it briefly, because it is so convoluted that it would take another 4 episodes for me to tell that story. And you're not going to have 4 episodes for me.
No, I can't do that. So let's go back and talk about, when was the book published? When did you said you weren't never even thinking about? So what was the light switch that turned away from saying, I haven't thought about doing this, and now all of a sudden I'm doing research? And how long a time was your research before you started writing? So give us a sense of that.
We recorded my mother in 2007, I believe. And I had these CDs for a number of years. So finally, I was working full-time job. Being a head of school is a 24/7 job. So I didn't really have the extra time to devote. But at one point I just said, okay, I have to transcribe the recording. And so I finished the transcription, and then I said, okay, what am I going to do with this now? As it turned out, that was right after that, I took myself to Lithuania and Poland in their footsteps. And so I kept a log of what I saw, what I felt.
Your parents wouldn't go, your father's passed at this point, right?
Yeah.
And your mother wouldn't go with you?
Oh no, my mother had also passed. So perhaps I waited for her to go, because she would have been angry that I was going, because that was verboten in the family, Germany and Lithuania. But she had to come to terms with the fact that we all went to Germany at one point or another for business or whatever. Anyway, the point is, I kept a log. And then at one point, I was asked to give a presentation about the impact of the Holocaust on myself to other 2Gs. And I sat down and I started to analyze the situation. And I gave that presentation. And then I thought, well, and I think maybe somebody said, why don't you publish all of this? And I thought, all right, let me see. So I started putting this whole thing together. And
What year is this?
this is now 2017, 18. And I found the publisher in 2018. And the book came out in January 2019 on International Holocaust Day.
Now, we'll go back to how much time did you need to research it?
Okay, so as I was writing this, I decided that I don't want anybody to be able to say, well, this isn't accurate, and then she doesn't remember properly, you know, the way they dismiss sometimes people's stories. So I went to other sources and I corroborated every single thing my mother said.
And how long of a time did it take you to do that?
Most of 2018. And so in the back of the book, there is a nice bibliography. And not only that, I found a book in Yiddish that describes the destruction, the annihilation of the Jews of Kovno. And it was in Yiddish, it's 400 pages. And so I specifically translated the chapters that referred to that were connected to what my mother said, her experience, and that corroborated her story. But then during COVID, I found a new project. I decided to translate the whole book. And now I told Jewish Gen that I'm translating it and they want to publish it with their Yisker Books project.
Yes. Do you know Esther Gilbert?
Esther Gilbert, no.
That's Sir Martin Gilbert's widow.
I know about him. Yeah.
She's a very good friend, and she's involved with Jewish Gen on the Yisker project.
Yeah.
So if you want to, I'd be happy to give you an introduction because she's a very lovely lady. She's in Canada.
Yeah.
And she has presented several times to the group live.
Yeah.
And we have a very close relationship that we've developed all virtually, just like we're doing today.
Yeah.
So
Well,
you spent a year researching your book. And tell us a little bit about, are you a good writer? What's your writing process? How do you go about putting your writing together? You talked about organization, you're organized.
Well, don't forget, I'm also an English teacher. And so I teach the writing process to my students because this is something I was never taught. I was never taught how to write. And for me, it's very important to teach kids how to write.
So let me ask you a question. So we have a lot of people who are listening, and we have a lot of people on the video channel who want to be authors or in the process of writing their own parents' stories. Give a few tips on how to write.
A few tips how to write?
Yeah.
Okay, first of all, I'm not talking about fiction at all.
Right.
I am not a fiction writer.
Right.
I am an academic writer. And the process that I use and that I teach my students, and most of my students have succeeded in writing as a result of it, is what I call the spider diagram. All right, I'm just giving you a picture. Okay. That's how you write. All right. So
what do you put in the bubbles?
Words, concepts, no sentences. You don't start with sentences.
What's in the nucleus?
Well, that's going to change. And this changes over time. That's why I recommend that you do it in pencil. All right.
Well, you can do it on the computer as well.
Well, you know what? I still believe in pencil and paper when it comes to thinking. And this is thinking. Writing is thinking. And I still believe that you can think better when you have other kinesthetic movement. All right. So, I got to get this centered here. And so every time you think of another concept, you put it in the place where it is connected. And you're not busy trying to formulate a sentence. You don't do that until much, much later. You get all your ideas on this word map or spider map, or there are all different descriptions of this thing. And you start seeing connections, and you start seeing collections of information, and you move this here and then you move that here. And you play with this for a long, long time. And sometimes your center, what you thought was your center, will no longer become your center, and something else will be the center. It'll come to you. It's almost magical. It's almost magical, in my opinion. It's like I learned when I lived in China, when an artist takes a piece of jade, he looks at this piece of jade, and the jade talks to him and tells him what's inside. And then he begins to carve, and that figure comes out, you see? And it's, in my opinion, that's helpful for writers.
Okay.
So it helps you organize things.
So you go through and you do your spider map. Then how do you write what's yours? Well, how do you transfer the spider map to a living document with words?
Because now you have a scaffold. Now you have a scaffold. You have a framework. All these pieces are filled in. It's a piece of cake afterwards to put the sentences together. You see, now you're fleshing it all out.
How long is that period in your mind? Like, how long did that spider map take you to complete? And how do you know when it's complete?
You never do. You ask any writer, they would always tell you after they published the book, they would rewrite it if they had a chance. And I've also felt that way about this book, because I found more information from my research about my family through genealogy, through interviews with my aunt, through other sources. I have more information now. So I don't think I'm going to do this, but if I were to write a second edition, I would have an additional chapter to add. More about my father, more information about the DP period. So, but every author will tell you the same thing. If you gave it to them again, they would fix it, they would change it, they would elongate it, they would shorten it. They're never happy with but at some point you just have to press send.
Right. I call it getting in the game.
That's it. At some point you have to say, genug, that's it. Send it off.
All right. We just hit the next episode, and it was a terrific 30 minutes we spent together, and we're going to come back on the other side for one more, and I won't tell the audience what I'm going to ask, and I won't tell you either. So I have some surprises for you. So come on back. You're listening to the Obligation of Memory podcast. I'm Jeffrey Geisner, founder of the Jewish Culture and Holocaust Remembrance Group. We're talking to Ettie Zilber, and we're talking all about her terrific book called The Holocaust Memoir of Love and Resilience, Mama's Survival of Lithuania to America. We'll see you on the other side.